Trust were the foundation of any marriage. That's why when I married Daniel 5 years ago, I thought we were building something strong, something unbreakable. He was charming, responsible, and always spoke about us as a team. We both worked hard, but I handled most of our financial planning. I had no problem managing our shared expenses, setting aside savings and making sure we had a safety net. Daniel, on the other hand, was more carefree. He wasn't reckless, just not as invested in the details. At first, everything seemed fine. We split household expenses, had a joint account for shared bills, and kept separate personal accounts for our own spending. It was a system that worked until I noticed something was off. It started subtly small. Unexplained withdrawals from our joint account. Odd charges labeled as consulting or personal loan that didn't match any of our usual transactions. At first, I brushed it off. Married couples share money. Maybe he just forgot to mention something. But then it became a pattern. Every few weeks, money vanished. Not huge amounts at once, but always enough to catch my attention. One evening, as Daniel scrolled through his phone on the couch, I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. "Hey," I said casually, keeping my tone light. "Have you noticed some weird charges on our account?" Daniel barely looked up. "Weird, how?" "Just some withdrawals I don't remember making," I replied, watching his reaction carefully. "Like last week, $500 labeled as consulting. Do you remember that?" He hesitated for half a second. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face before he shrugged. "Oh, that it was for something work-related. Maybe I reimbursed a client and forgot to tell you." Something about the way he said it felt off. "But you never mentioned it before," I pressed, "and I don't see any reimbursements coming back in." Daniel sighed, finally setting his phone down. "It's not a big deal, Sophia. You handle your money, I handle mine. And we both contribute to the house, right?" That answer didn't sit right with me. Sure, we had separate finances, but we always discussed significant expenses, especially anything that involved our shared account. I let it go that night, but the nagging feelings stayed. A few days later, when Daniel left for work, I sat down at my laptop and pulled up our transaction history. My stomach twisted as I scrolled. The payments were consistent, always labeled the same way, always just vague enough to not raise immediate suspicion, and every single one of them went to the same name, Ryan. Daniel's ex-boyfriend. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe it was just someone with the same name. Maybe it was a coincidence. But as I scrolled further, my pulse pounded in my ears. Thousands of dollars had disappeared over the past year, all sent to Ryan. My chest tightened. My hands felt ice cold against the keyboard. How long had this been going on? And more importantly, why that night? I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I played it casual, testing the waters before dropping the truth in front of him. As we sat at the dinner table, I took a sip of my water and asked, "Hey, have you been in touch with Ryan lately?" For a split second, Daniel froze. Just a flicker of hesitation before he masked it with a casual chuckle. "Ryan," he scoffed, shaking his head. "Why would I talk to him?" That was all the confirmation I needed. I reached for the folded papers beside me and slowly placed them on the table. His eyes flicked to them, and I saw the exact moment realization hit him. Printed bank statements. So I said, my voice steady but sharp, "You haven't been sending him money." Daniel's face went pale, his mouth opened, then closed like he was scrambling for the right words. Finally, he let out a nervous chuckle, forcing a dismissive smile. "Sophia, it's not what you think. He just needed a little help. I felt bad for him, that's all." I clenched my jaw, barely containing the simmering anger in my chest. Bad for him. My voice was quiet, now cold. You're taking money out of our accounts and sending it to your ex. Without telling me why? Daniel sighed, dramatically shaking his head, like I was the one being unreasonable. He's struggling, okay? He just needs help right now. You'd understand if you weren't so... I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Understand, I repeated, leaning forward. What I understand is that you've been lying to me for months, maybe years, so tell me the truth. Why are you really doing this? His face hardened, and that's when he dropped the real bombshell. You're my wife, he said simply. You have no choice, it's our money and I get to decide how I use it. I went completely still for a moment. I thought I'd misheard him. But no, he meant every single word. And that's when it hit me. Daniel didn't feel guilty. He didn't feel remorseful. He felt entitled. A wave of disgust rolled through me. He wasn't even sorry, not for the lies. Not for the betrayal. Not for funneling our hard-earned money to the man he used to be in love with. That was the moment I knew. Daniel was going to regret every single dollar he ever took from me. But first I needed to have a conversation with Ryan. I didn't just leave the house. I stormed out. Rage boiled in my veins. My hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, I thought I might break it. Daniel had spent our money, my money, on his ex, and then had the audacity to act like I owed it to him. I wasn't thinking about logic anymore. I wasn't thinking about what I'd do when I got there. All I knew was that I needed to see Ryan's face when I told him. I knew I needed him to understand exactly what he had taken from me. And when I pulled up to his apartment, a rundown complex on the other side of town, I expected to find some smug deadbeat loser lounging around, leeching off my husband's generosity. Instead, when he opened the door, Ryan looked just as shocked as I was. Not guilty, not defensive, just confused. What the hell are you talking about? Ryan asked, his expression twisted in confusion. I shoved the bank statements into his face. You think I wouldn't find out? You've been draining my husband's accounts for a year. Did you really think this wouldn't catch up to you? Ryan blinked. Then he looked down at the papers, brows furrowing as he scanned the transactions. His mouth parted slightly before he muttered,
Wait.
This is from Daniel. He looked genuinely surprised, and that only pissed me off more. Don't play dumb, I snapped. My fist clenched at my sides. He's been sending you thousands. You've been using him like an ATM? Ryan let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. I didn't ask for this money, he muttered. I froze what Ryan sighed, stepping back into his apartment, leaving the door open, a silent invitation. Against my better judgment, I followed. Read, he said, handing me his phone. And as my eyes scanned the messages, my stomach twisted with a sickening realization. Daniel hadn't just given Ryan money, he had begged him to take it. And that was only the beginning. I watched as Juliet's world crumbled around her, her desperate eyes darting between me, the judge and the stack of legal documents that sealed her fate. She had spent months lying to me, stealing from me, funneling money to her ex without remorse. And now she was paying the price. As I left the courtroom with Gordon by my side, a rush of satisfaction coursed through me. But even as we celebrated our victory, I knew this wasn't over. Juliet wasn't the type to accept defeat easily. The first sign came that night. My phone buzzed, Juliet. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Curiosity got the better of me. Colin, please, we need to talk. Her voice was shaky, raw, but I wasn't going to let emotions cloud my judgment. There's nothing to talk about, Juliet, I said flatly. Please just give me 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her the next day. But on my terms, we met at a quiet cafe, One of those places we used to go to when we were happy. Now it felt like a crime scene. The echoes of what we used to be hanging in the air. Juliet looked different, hollow. Like the weight of her choices had finally settled in. Her hair was slightly disheveled. Her makeup less precise, she wasn't the confident, entitled woman I had married. She was desperate. "Colin, I made a mistake." She started reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "A mistake," I repeated. "You spent our money on your ex. You lied to me for months. You violated our prenup, and now that it's all backfiring, it's just a mistake," her lip quivered. I wasn't thinking straight. I felt guilty for what I did to Gordon. "And stop lying," I leaned forward, my voice firm. "You didn't do it out of guilt? You were keeping Gordon as an option in case things with me fell apart." Juliet's face went pale. I had hit the truth and she knew it. "I never wanted to lose you." She whispered, "You lost me. The moment you thought you could betray me and get away with it." She inhaled sharply, blinking back tears. "What if we try again?" What if I cut her off with a bitter laugh? "You're not asking for another chance because you love me. You're asking because you have nothing left." She flinched. "I loved you, Juliet," I said, my voice softer now. "But you don't love anyone but yourself. And that's why you'll always lose." I stood up, leaving her there broken, alone and finally forced to face the consequences of her own actions. For the first time in months, I felt free. No more lies. No more betrayal. No more being manipulated. With Juliet out of my life, I was ready to move on, and that's when I met her. Her name was Eva. We crossed paths at a business seminar, and something about her immediately drew me in. She was confident but kind, intelligent but humble, everything Juliet had never been. One evening, as we sat across from each other at a quiet restaurant, she tilted her head and smiled. "You know, Colin, I've been thinking you're different. Most people I meet seem like they're just playing a game. But you," she hesitated. "You've been through something real?" I exhaled. "Yeah, you could say that." "Want to talk about it?" I paused. Then for the first time, I told someone my story. Not as a victim, but as someone who had survived. And for the first time, I felt like I was truly leaving Juliet behind. But Juliet wasn't done with me yet. Juliet's last move. A few weeks later, just as I was settling into my new life, Juliet struck back. It started with a call from my lawyer. "Colin, we have a problem." I frowned. "What kind of problem?" "Juliet is contesting the divorce settlement. She's claiming she was coerced into signing the prenup, and that the financial penalties are unfair." I nearly laughed. That's ridiculous. She had months to dispute it before the court ruling. She didn't, I know, but she's filing an appeal. And worse, she's going to the press. My blood ran cold. The press? "She's spinning a story, Colin, claiming you manipulated her, set her up, and financially destroyed her out of revenge." I clenched my jaw, of course. This wasn't about winning back money. Juliet wanted to ruin me publicly, to paint herself as the victim and me as the cold, calculated villain. I had taken everything from her. Now she was trying to take my reputation. But I wasn't about to let her win. Instead of reacting in anger, I did something smarter. I gathered evidence. Screenshots of our conversations. Bank records showing how she had willingly funneled money to Gordon. The legal documents she had signed without coercion. I wasn't going to fight this battle in the courtroom. I was going to end it in the court of public opinion. So I reached out to a journalist, one known for exposing liars. "I have a story for you," I said. And just like that, the real truth started making its way into the light. Juliet's fall days later. The headline read, "Wife who stole from husband to fund ex gets exposed in court." Now she wants sympathy. The article dismantled every lie Juliet had tried to spread. It laid out the facts, how she had lied, stolen, manipulated, and ultimately ruined herself. The public turned against her in an instant. Her attempts to garner sympathy only made things worse. People saw through her within a week. She had gone from playing the victim to being ridiculed online. Every attempt to defend herself only led to more backlash. And then she disappeared. Social media deleted public statements. None. Her last desperate attempt to control the narrative had failed. Juliet had spent our marriage taking from me, lying to me, betraying me, and in the end, she had destroyed herself. One evening, as I sat on my balcony, ever by my side, I let out a deep breath. "It's over," I murmured. She smiled. "Yeah, it is. Juliet was gone from my life." And for the first time in years, I was finally free. Her attempt to smear my name in the press had backfired spectacularly. The public turned on her and she vanished into obscurity. I thought that was the end of it, that I had finally closed the book on that chapter of my life. I was wrong. Juliet's last attempt. A few months passed. Life was good, peaceful. Eva and I were growing closer. She was everything Juliet wasn't: honest, kind, and emotionally mature. We weren't rushing into anything, but for the first time in years, I felt what real love was supposed to be. Then one evening, just as I was about to leave work, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut told me to answer. Hello. Silence, then Juliet's voice. "Colin, please don't hang up." I gripped the phone tighter. Of course it was her. "What do you want, Juliet?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "I need to see you just once, please." I exhaled. "We have nothing to talk about." "It's important," she insisted. I have something to tell you." I wanted to refuse. I should have refused. But curiosity got the better of me. "Fine, one conversation." That's it. We met at a small coffee shop. Not our old spots. Not anywhere that held memories. Just neutral ground when she walked in. I almost didn't recognize her. Juliet was always put together. Hair perfect, makeup, flawless clothes designer. But now she looked exhausted. Worn down, like life had chewed her up and spat her out. I didn't feel bad for her. She had done this to herself. She sat across from me, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, avoiding my gaze. "Say what you need to say, Juliet," I said flatly. She swallowed hard. "I messed up." I raised an eyebrow. "That's not news." Her lip quivered. But she pushed forward after everything. I thought I could start over. But no one trusts me. No one believes me. I've lost everything, Colin. My reputation, my friends, my future. Again, not my problem. She flinched. I wanted to say I'm sorry, she whispered. "I know it doesn't change anything. But I needed you to know that for the first time." There was no manipulation in her voice. No fake tears, just regret. But I couldn't let that change anything. "I appreciate the apology," I said, "but I can't forgive you. Not because I hate you, but because I've moved on." Juliet looked down. I understand for the first time. She truly did. I stood up, placing a few bills on the table. "Goodbye, Juliet." She didn't stop me. She just sat there staring into her coffee as I walked away. That was the last time I saw Juliet. Word spread that she left the city soon after, vanished. Some said she moved back to her hometown. Others claimed she tried to rebuild her life somewhere new. I didn't care. She was out of my life for good. And as I sat on the beach one evening, Eva's hand in mine watching the sunset, I finally felt free. I had lost Juliet, But in the end, I had gained everything.